Good morning, everyone. Welcome to World IA Cafe Speaker Series. Thank you for joining in today. And as always, the webinars are excellent, and I'm sure today's would be no different. My name is Rupa Mishra. I'm an associate teaching professor in the MBS program at Rutgers University. I manage and teach in the user experience design as well as the product design concentrations in the MBS program. I'm also an active member of World IA Association. The topic for today's webinar is Click, Chat, Comply, how bots are guiding users through government websites. As I was just mentioning, chatbots are everywhere, and I'm sure this talk will be fascinating. The speaker for this interactive event is Angie Bourne, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience in user research and UX design. Welcome, Angie, to World IA Cafe. Angie began her career in usability consulting, later expanding into service design. Her professional journey includes roles at a large bank, a small B2B software company, and currently she is back in agency work at LIP, where she focuses on web applications and large-scale websites. In this talk, Angie will explore the evolving landscape of digital government services. As public services increasingly move online, the need for intuitive and user-friendly access points becomes more critical. Enter the government chatbot, a conversational interface designed to streamline access to information, answer public queries, and guide users through complex bureaucratic systems. And enjoy the webinar today. Now over to you, Angie.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot for the introduction. I wanted to talk about this topic mainly because it's so close to my heart at the moment, and also because I heard a lot of weird stuff about how people use chatbots lately. Sometimes like portrayed through the media, sometimes also through people, kind of technology strategists who are talking about these things. And so I thought it's really cool to actually go through what we have observed and what we have from quantitative data. Now, when I say government website, it really is, the scope is really for websites that either like different states, it could be civil councils, it could be individual government departments, really depending on how the country is structured and then how they structure their websites. It can be on all levels. So from the smallest little council all the way up to kind of the state or the national government. I myself have been working for a national government in Switzerland, as well as for cantons, which is kind of our equivalent of a state, but also for civil councils. So kind of on all levels I've worked with. And the reason why I know a lot about how people actually use chatbots, which is why I kind of emphasize on that actually, is that we have built at LEAP, we have actually built a product that does kind of these closed chatbots. So what they do is they only search, so they're LLMs, and they only search kind of what's on the one website that we give it or that we tell it to search. And so for the cantons, for example, we say, hey, just look at everything that's in here, and then obviously we also configure it a bit, but the cool thing about it is that it actually starts to learn how to read all these like weird PDFs that people still put online everywhere. It can read structured data, it can read unstructured data, but the scope is then always given right through the site itself. And the advantage there is that governments have much more control over what's said there, and it's a bit of a smaller use case, which can be quite useful for people. I think one other really big difference between them and kind of I would say a for-profit company, for example, is that it has quite a captive audience, right? There's no competition. You have to use it in order to get stuff done, in order to get your permits, in order to whatever you need from the government, you have to use it. Which also then takes the pressure off a lot of them to actually just do everything they can. But the other pressure that it puts on them is that they need to be able to be accessible for everyone. They need to be inclusive. So not like a private company that can just say, oh, well, we don't care about this target group. We kind of exclude them. The government obviously can't do that. And so that's quite an interesting setup, and it puts it gives us quite a clear scope. So what I wanted to start with is to quickly tell you about why people actually use the government website, like what we tried, like what we found out there. And then I'm going to talk about what they currently do. And the last thing I'm going to tell you is where I got very surprised, or where I thought, wow, this is like not what I expected, what people are doing. So I'm going to take you through this. So when we talk about a government website, typically the user journey, so I'm a user-centered designer, so I've always looked at kind of what the user journey is. The user journey usually starts with kind of finding out the basics. Now, if you've never done a process, if it's, for example, a new thing that you've never done, you need a certain, often it's permits we need to get. Sometimes we need to comply with the law by, I don't know, telling the government about something. The first thing you need to do is kind of, well, is this complicated? And then the next thing is, how much time will I need to invest? Like, is this a big one? What do I need? Who can even help me with my case? Sometimes there's lots of confusion about, do I need to go to my city council for this, or do I need to go to a state? Like, who's actually responsible for this? And so these are kind of the basic questions. Now, if you've done the process before, or you kind of talk to your friends and ask them, you kind of probably don't use the website for this step, but a lot of people do. So we see that people actually go on to a government website a lot for this. The next one is then to get the details. So once you know, oh, I want to get my spouse moving to Switzerland, so I need to get a work permit for her, then I want to get the details, right? Which one is the best option for me? How much is this going to cost? What's the process? And so on. So it's going to be much more detailed. Before I then go into the last bit, it's actually doing the task. So I need to get this form now. I need to fill this out. I need to send an email to these people, or whatever. Sometimes it's still paper forms, whatever then the actual task requires. And the thing is, a lot of times people are really on the side to get stuff done. This is also why we look at the journey with this lens. And when we now look at what this means for a website, it means that a lot of times people come back multiple times. So the more complex the process is, the more often they kind of come back, or the more they split this process into multiple steps. And this is quite important to us, because they need different information at different times, right? And so what we have started to do is we had started to look at that, like, how do bots currently actually help? And it all started with these kind of basic bots that could just do rule-based stuff. Like, so they could say, if you need this, if you, for example, you need a birth certificate, then you need to go here. So the rule-based bot started to learn kind of all the rules, and we call that a basic bot. But we now have moved, and this is kind of the model that we're currently doing. We kind of now have used chatbots to be more of an actually navigational help. So that's where we are today with a lot of these chatbots. What they do is they just help you get to the right page, right? They don't do much more yet. You can ask your question, and then they say, cool, this is the person who's responsible for this. And I will give you plenty of examples during the talk for how this is done with the navigational help. But the vision obviously is that it can become much more of a consultant. So like in areas where the law might be quite complicated, you can start to get a chatbot that's more of a consultant to you. So you could say, hey, I want to rebuild my house, and I need to know what permits I need from the government for this. And I don't know how it is where you live, but here in Switzerland, everything is super regulated. So you need to get you even need to get a permit for a garden shed. Usually, as soon as you concrete it in, you have to get a permit from the council. So what the consultant level can then do is to actually ask you back. You can say, hey, do I need a permit for the garden shed? And the the chatbot asks you back, well, it depends. Are you planning to concrete it in? How far away is it from the neighbor's garden, and so on? So it kind of asks you questions back. But we are not really there yet. This is kind of where we're trying to head. And this is also where applications like ChatGPT or Claude are probably ahead of us to actually get this intelligence going. And then the last step, or not last, but one of the aspirational steps, obviously, is that I can actually get the chatbot to act on behalf of me. So I can get it to be my agent, and it knows all my data, and I can just say, hey, can you, I don't know, get a birth certificate for me, for myself, and then it will know all my data, it will know where to get it, and it kind of does this on behalf of me. So similar to how we now start to see things like, oh, can ChatGPT actually start to book a flight for me? This is kind of the same model for a government website, but we are very, very far away from that. So that's why we, at the moment, mainly focus on this navigational help. This is what we can do really well. But obviously with the aspiration of moving more, like going up the steps of this kind of maturity curve. Now, what's also important when you deal with government is that there's a really big difference if the answer is wrong. So if I have a chatbot that gives me the wrong answer, it could be not so bad. Like I could ask stuff where it's like, oh well, it just gave me the wrong thing. So for example, do I need to, I don't know, have a light on my bike at night? It could, if it says the wrong thing, it could be like, okay, fine, maybe I'll get fined. Not ideal, but it's not super bad. But if I want to say, hey, what do I have to do to get support for childcare? Then it's probably a bit more important that you don't do the wrong steps, right? That you don't fill in the wrong forms or whatever, that it doesn't, that it just is right. And this is one of the biggest issues we have currently with actually, and this is more of an internal issue with our clients that want to introduce the chatbot, is that they're really, really scared of getting answers wrong, because they are liable for what they do, and so if the answer is wrong, they could have some issues with that. So so this is kind of the setup, and this is kind of how like we think about these government services and what people are doing. So now I want to jump into, and I promise that I'm going to show you what people are actually doing. And what's really interesting is when we talk about what they actually ask, so how do they actually use it? What do they actually enter in this little search box? It's really interesting because it so heavily depends on how the interface is designed. So all of you UI designers in the crowd will your hearts will jump because your job is very important here. Because what we have seen is that it makes a massive difference how the bot is implemented. And there are three different models. So the first one is kind of the detached model. That's what most people do at the moment. Most sites do. So the detached model means that you have a bot that's kind of accessible often through a little thing down here. And then when you open it, it actually opens in a new window. And in that new window, I can phrase my question, and it's quite separated. That's why we call it like detached. So it's very much separated from the site, and it's a very careful way of implementing this. What you're signaling with this version or this UI is that you are like, this is not really the site yet, right? Like we're still a bit like careful. We're still a bit cautious of like you can use this, but they usually have massive disclaimers. Hey, don't take us into court if we're saying something wrong. It's a machine. It doesn't know everything yet. And so there's a lot of kind of these steps in between before you can actually use it. And that also means they're not very confident yet, right, with this. And also the other thing is that it's also a bit hidden, probably for a reason, because they don't want everyone immediately to already use it, because they're a bit scared that it could be wrong. Then the next part is, or the next way to do it is this kind of idea of doing it partly integrated. So you could have it like, what we see a lot is they have it in the footer somewhere, and like if you didn't find your answer in the page, there's a way to enter the chat in the footer. So it's a bit more prominent, but still not very, still not very integrated, but it's definitely much more kind of part of the site rather than like a separate application like the detached version is. And then the next one is the fully integrated one. And this is where we are heading now with one of the cantons. One of my clients, they are doing it in the search bar. So like when you think about, well, what's the point of actually having a chatbot? Like, isn't that just replacing search? This is kind of what we're trialing now, so that when people are using the search, we take that as a sign that they couldn't find what they want, or they don't want to use navigation, they don't want to use the menus, they want to phrase their own question or their own search terms. And so we're going to fully integrate it into the search. And the way this now then looks is that you first get an answer from the chatbot, and then you get all the search results from the regular search. It's something that we came up with a while ago to kind of trial it and test it out. And funny enough, you now are getting used to this because you get in Google, you get the Gemini results first, right? So it's actually starting to be a pattern that people are already getting used to, because when you do a Google search, you first get the chat answer and then you get all your search results. So it's actually quite similar. And so we're looking at what this means for us, and we're trialing a whole bunch of stuff with that. But what's important, and why I said the user interface is very important for this, is the way that you phrase your question, the way that you phrase your label, for example, is very, very crucial. So if you just say, this is a search, that doesn't really say much yet. But if you say, please ask your question here, or phrase your question here, or what do you need to know today? We even had some interfaces. So one of our clients, the Canton of Lucerne, even says as a placeholder text, please phrase your question as a full sentence. So they're kind of trying to prompt people to actually use full sentences. They're trying to kind of help people to say, hey, look, you can't, it's not just about entering keywords, you can actually enter this. And all of these little things that we think, oh, it's just a UI. Whenever I talk to the developers and people who are kind of working with this, they're always like, oh, it's just UI. Don't worry, like whatever, we just write something. It really, we found that it makes a massive difference. What's on the label, what's in the placeholder text, what's on the search button. Does it say search? Does it say ask? Does it say whatever the wording is there? So there's lots of micro copy kind of A/B testing around this, which I think is really very important. Now, when we talk about what people typically ask, I can also give you a bit of an indication of what are the typical things that people want to know. So we place them into 4 rough categories. The first one is probably the most like obvious one. This is the rules, responsibilities, and procedures. So like asking things like, how does this work? What do I need to do for this? And so on. Then that's kind of quite a common category. Then what's interesting is the second category, person and contact, is actually it's the second most popular category, because we get so many questions around who's responsible for this, who does this, and this is really about people. And a lot of times also it's about, can you give me an email address of this person, or oftentimes it's, can you give me an email address of the head of department of so and so. So they want to like have direct access through this. And then also a common category, but not as common, is like where something is, like the physical location or the address of something. We have that quite a bit. And then we have costs and fees, which is quite an important one. So how much does it cost? How long does it take? And so on. So these are kind of all quite important ones. So we have cost, fees, and actually it's also about duration a lot of times, like how, however long something takes. Usually these questions, so this is kind of roughly the ones that we can identify quite easily in all the search questions. And then there's a whole bucket of like anything else. So we're still kind of refining the model at the moment around like defining these buckets and being able to kind of make a bit more sense of what it is that people commonly ask. I also have to say the long tail is so long around how many different types of questions that people ask that this analysis is quite cumbersome, actually, because it's just, some of it is very difficult to analyze. And then after all this abstract, what do people ask? I brought you 4 examples that are quite, I would say, quite typical in their variation and in their style. So the first type is this question around where do I actually need to go for this? And so we had quite a few, where can I get an ID card for this, for a newborn, for myself, when I've lost it, and so on. And it's this type of question around like who's responsible for it, and that we get quite a lot. Then we also have very specific questions around, for example, when I want to do my taxes, what deductions can I do? Or this one actually is more around when I get unemployment benefits, what's actually deducted from it. So they're starting to be quite specific, right? Like these type of questions. There's also lighter cases, like I lost my sunglasses on the bus. Where do I need to go? Like who can help me find them? Like people just they use the chatbot for a lot of things that are just have something to do with the city or the canton, the place that they live. And what's also interesting, there's also like more questions that are more about advice, right? So if you like, there's lots and lots of questions around joining the police or joining like how do I get a job at the government and so on. And so these are kind of very typical questions. So I just picked a few to see that, and these are really like exactly how people phrase them. And how they actually like use the box. Now, this is hopefully not all this is hopefully all very logical, or maybe also if you have worked with this type of bots, maybe not so surprising. So I did promise you where I was surprised, and to show you a bit where I was, where I found this the new stuff. So first question I had, or where I thought it was really interesting, is this question of, do people actually still searching keywords or full sentences? So you can think about it yourself. You can also put it in the chat of what you think people are doing. I have the chat open so I can actually read it. Yeah, keywords, yeah. Still using keywords, yeah. And I mean, it's also like, this is also where this whole thing of the UI really dictates a bit what people are using. So we see keywords, yeah. Some don't know the full sentence to search, yeah. That's also often possible, exactly. So I can show you, I'm allowed to show you a stat I've aggregated from 2 of the chatbots that have been around for the longest. So where I have the most kind of reliable and viable data. So I can actually reveal what we have found. The question types, like the keywords, are still quite dominant. So I was a bit surprised because I always thought, oh, chatbot, people all know, they do prompts, they do full prompts, very long prompts. But the full sentences are actually only 64%. And this is now already the data from kind of, I call it normal use or business as usual. So very like quite a few months, but also not a trial phase. And the way that they have been using it is that we first had the hypothesis that new users would start with keywords and then go more into full sentences, but it's not really, I can't really find hard evidence yet that that's the case. I always thought that's kind of the journey, right? You first try with keywords and then you do full sentences. But we also have quite a bit of internal use. And so these people still use a lot of keywords as well. So it's really, yeah, I was a bit surprised that we still have that many keywords. But now seeing your answers in the chat, maybe it's actually the opposite. Maybe it's surprising how many people are actually using full sentence. But what that means for us is that we definitely need to still optimize for both and still have both cases in mind, unless we change the interface. So typical stuff that we see is that people say stuff like register a dog, like because in Switzerland you need to register a dog when you have one. But then we don't really know. So you all know probably the problems with that is that a lot of times we then don't know what it is that they actually want. Do they want to do the registration? Do they want to know how much it costs and so on? As opposed to when you have a full sentence, right? And so it's really interesting because, as I said, like the UI can control this a bit. Like we can do some of the stuff through the UI and also through the size of the search bar, actually. That makes a big difference as well. Like, you know how this usability principle of when you have a form, you choose the length of the form of the, like, that should be the expected input. And so if you make it a very long form field, you also get potentially longer questions. We never A/B tested this though. I'd be super happy to hear if someone actually has some data on this or is running some experiments. Would be really cool to exchange a bit on that. Oh yeah, and so Mike just says in the chat how much the action word asks makes people actually think they should be typing a full questions. Yeah, that's exactly what we ask ourselves as well, right? Like this, how do we prompt this? Good. Then we go to the next topic. Now, how much data do you think they give? So you're on a government website and you're asking a chatbot a question. What do you think people are doing? Again, happy to have it in the chat. Hear a bit what you think. Like a data about themselves, how much context do they give? So maybe also a bit from your own experience of how you use chatbots, like how much do you tell, like what's your prompting style? A lot of context, yeah. So someone saying, yeah, probably a lot of it. I'm going to reveal some of it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So Mike is right. With the bad search engines have gotten people to actually give less keywords, give less prompts, but those people who have been getting used to chatbots have probably learned that, oh, sometimes more context is better. So what we have learned or what we have seen is that the amount of long questions is still quite small. So when we say long questions, it's up from 100 characters on. That's what we categorized as long. And it's only about 5% of all questions that are above that length. The majority of questions is in the mid-range, so between 30 and 100 characters. So we just took characters as kind of an indication, a rough indication of how much context they give. So about 50% is in that mid-range, but still 36 is short. So this is also where this whole idea comes from, what's a keyword and a full sentence question. And what's really important here, or what's interesting here, is that we were a bit surprised by how much context people give. But also, and this is the most concerning bit at the moment, is by how much personal information they give. So they sometimes say, stuff like, I have one here that says, oh, my name is so-and-so. I would like to inquire about the current status of my ID. It's currently being renewed and I haven't received it yet. The confirmation number was blah, 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 blah. I need a confirmation from my employer. I would be very grateful if you could provide me with a letter or a brief confirmation. So they actually talk to the chatbot like that. And so it's really interesting how they kind of have this idea that the chatbot can then act on behalf of them. And we are obviously like so far away from this at this stage, but the expectation is starting to be there. And now, I don't know if anyone has worked with governments who are usually very scared of data protection problems and so on. So our biggest concern here is that when people start to share all this personal data with us, like some confirmation numbers, they share birth dates, they share whatever, like they share a lot of personal data, that we need to be very careful of where this data then goes. We have quite strict laws around, where we can send this data. And so there are some problems here that we are starting to face now, because at the beginning we said, oh, don't worry, people just use it like a search engine, right? They just search for something and then they get this, then they get the information out. But now that we see that some of them are actually using this much more as a communication tool, we need to be a bit careful. And this also impacts our technical architecture of where our data can sit. Yeah. So then, what do you think? And I actually already saw one answer in the in the chat here around that actually goes like is around this or is answering this. But is the chat answer actually enough? So if you look at just the chat answer, is that enough for people to then say, cool, I know now what to do, or I can go off and I do something else? And I already see in some of the replies, probably not. I also saw one reply that was around, this example with Gemini and Google, that often the chat answer is actually not even good. So that's another problem, right? Is the chat answer right? Is it good enough? Is it good at all? Or do you still go by the links below, right? So are you still following the links? And what we have seen in the government context at this stage is clearly that everyone wants to go to the source. So we have hardly seen any answers that were okay to answer where the chat answer was enough. So obviously the example I have here is a bit more complex anyway, right? Like getting citizenship in any country or almost any country is quite difficult anyway. But here it was very obvious, but also very similar questions where we saw, hey, people always click on these links. So the difference that we do what we do as opposed to the free ChatGPT version is that we always show the reference straight away. So it always shows exactly where this is coming from. By the way, we have improved the interface since. We found in usability tests that people did not understand what this link 1, link 2, link 3, whatever means. So we have changed it since. But it's an old screenshot basically of how the system used to work. But what's happening here, and that's also why we say it's a navigational help, is that pretty much everyone followed the link and then wanted to see the original source. So I can show you how this is done at the moment. So when you have a search, actually I prepped, it doesn't really matter. So, but if you want to, let's do the dog registration one again. I want to register my dog. Then, oh, sorry, I did it on the old system or on the live system. Sorry, just a sec. I'll need to do it here. By the way, the chatbot speaks English, but the interface at the moment is mostly in German. And it speaks obviously most languages because it's just a regular LLM behind it, which is also a big plus. But what people are now doing, they always hover here and they always go to the reference, right? Oh, these are a bit bad references because they go to the same place. But every user that we watched always went to the actual page. And hardly ever, only with very few question types, they actually stayed with the chat answer. It was only when, do you remember before where we said it's not so bad if the answer is wrong? That's when they kind of trusted the chatbot and said, oh, well, it just gives me an information, it's fine. But in a lot of cases, they actually just used it as a way to get to the right place and get to the right page in the end. So yeah, they all thought the answer is just the start, and now I'm going to see what's officially said on the website. So the trust is still not very high. So then I have one more question, or actually two. Internal usage. You can imagine that government workers themselves also use the chatbot quite a bit, especially in the pilot phases. We saw that a lot. But and also we got them to pilot it and check their own content. What do you think happens over time? So again, feel free to answer in the chat. Do you think it will, like the internal usage will actually increase over time? Will it decrease? It's just really cool at the beginning to check my content, and then it's kind of, okay, stay the same, increase over time, yeah? Will be really interesting to also hear an explanation of why you think that. I'll just wait for it. One more minute to see if, or 30 seconds more, if someone else has an opinion. So we only have one vote for increase. Okay, if nothing else is coming, I'll reveal. So what's important to know that a lot of the, at the moment, when we, so I've compared about, this was actually 4 different websites that I have access to the analytics for, and that actually differentiate between internal and external traffic. So I have access to a lot more clients' data, but only 4 of them actually differentiate between internal traffic and external traffic. When you just look at the website, it's roughly over time, it's steadying out at about 10% of traffic of the website usually comes from internal users, or at least the ones that are identified as internal. But with the chatbot, we actually had about 25%. And this is past the pilot phase. This is really what's going on. And it's really interesting because that also means that they actually use this tool quite frequently for getting stuff done internally. You can imagine that a lot of people actually have to deal with other agencies. They have to have something from another office, for example. And so they use the chatbot actually quite extensively, and this traffic hasn't gone down much. So it did very, very slightly decrease at the beginning because we had all these trials and people were encouraged to actually use it. So then when it started to normalize, it decreased a bit. So at the beginning it was obviously over 50%, and then it decreased a bit, but now it's steadied out at 25%. And I think that's really interesting that it's still doing more, like that is still more than the actual website. So then last question. You know how a lot of times when we try to introduce new stuff, we say, well, let's just run a pilot, right? And so let's just try it out and then see what we learn. It's also this whole idea of, yeah, like break things fast, just try it, and then we will learn. What we have seen is that there is a massive difference between running the chatbot as a pilot project, where you say, okay, we'll just try it out, maybe with this area of the website, or yeah, depending on how it's integrated, fully integrated, sometimes partly integrated, but let's just try it out first. What we have found is that it actually is a massive difference in terms of how many people are using it and what people do. So this is the data I'm allowed to use. It's just from the canton of Basel-Stadt. It's the most reliable one, basically, of what we had. So you see the internal trials, they're still quite significant. This is only government workers, actually, that first bit here. So June and July in 24 was only internal use. And they used it quite significantly. They had to, or quite a lot, they had to kind of do all this like checks and does it work? They were also a bit scared. Is this going to work with my data? Is this going to like give wrong answers? So obviously these checks were also important to then say, yes, we can go live with it, with the new website. On the 24th of August, 24th of August, we launched the new website. And so you see a massive spike in August. This is now the first 2 weeks. Almost all of this traffic is the first 2 weeks of when it went live. You can imagine it was like in the media, like media was talking about it, or were like people trying it out, like people were talking about it. And so it had this massive increase in use. So the initial go live phase in August, and also you can see it, the first week of September was also quite heavy. And then it started to normalize. But that initial go live phase was really interesting because what was so interesting is that it was used completely differently to how it is now used, now that it got kind of introduced and like people have gotten used to it. And the difference was that people were just trying it out. They often didn't know what to ask. So the type of questions were actually really poor. And we saw that again and again in trials. I have 2 other clients that had the exact same problem. When they just say, hey, try out our new chatbot, just ask it anything. Let's see that, like, we need to quality test it. The questions were actually really poor. They were not real. And it's like those of you who do user testing know all about this, right? You don't just go to a website and say, hey, just try out this website, right? Users come to a place because they have a task. They have a real use case, right? And so just trying it out is not a very real use case. And it actually, the type of questions that were asked are absolutely like so different to how it was then used when people started to come with their real concerns, with their real questions. And the other thing is that people are also quite critical at the beginning, right? And then the next problem we had is we had so many, we call them the monkey butt users or monkey butt questions. I don't know if you are familiar with this concept, but when early days when systems were tested, you always had these users who would just enter some bollocks words in it just to see what the system does, right? They just want to try it out. They want to try the limits. And so the monkey butt comes from users, especially with voice systems. When people were trying out voice systems, they always like some people would just say monkey butt, monkey butt, monkey butt, and then the system couldn't answer or the system didn't know what they wanted. And so then they were like, haha, this system is so dumb. It can't actually answer, like it doesn't even know what to do. But I mean, the use case wasn't real, right? And so we had a lot of these monkey butt questions, right? Like, how tall is the tallest tree in so-and-so, or how, like, just, or sometimes even more stupid things like, we had a lot of, also a lot of trolling where they tried to do prompt injection. We had a lot of the, just like really pushing the limits of the system. And so it was very hard to learn in that phase. And the good thing is now that it's kind of started to normalize. So when I now look at the data starting in about October, and I look at all the data, it actually becomes much more interesting because now people are really using it for real things. And this brings me to the last, just 2 slides. So that means for us, the opportunities here are really that on one hand, we can have a lot of added value through answering those long tail questions. So I see a huge potential in the chatbot actually helping with the more complex cases, with the more like that you can actually give a bit of that context, that you can and you can have your very specific questions, right? Because the chatbot knows everything that's on the site that we have defined that it should know. And plus it does have a bit of extra knowledge, right? It has a lot of language knowledge, so it knows synonyms, it knows obviously other languages, but it also knows stuff like, what is perlite? Is this an organic substance? And therefore, can it go onto the compost? And so there's a lot of stuff like that, and a lot of kind of the more detailed and nitty-gritty questions. And then the last thing that actually makes me very hopeful with this technology is I had multiple test participants. This all like was qualitative data and quantitative data. So we also had a lot of user tests with these solutions. And I had this one wonderful quote of someone saying, it's actually more fun to do this super boring, tedious, and sometimes difficult stuff together with a chatbot. So they actually found it much more fulfilling than clicking around in the website and in the navigation. And I thought that that's actually quite a nice thing, that at least it's a bit more fun. Like, you have to do it anyway. And we had multiple participants who said, actually, this is much more like fun now to do this. So I would like, this is it. I'm going to close. Now, Misha, are you going to facilitate the questions, or should we just open a, yeah? Cool. I'm assuming we'll also give the slides. So these are my contact details. You can always come and contact me for more info. But yeah, let's do wrap up and questions.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Bye. See you again soon.
Yes,
at another one.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.